On September 11, 2001, 19 men affiliated with a militant Wahhabi sect from the Islamic group Al-Qaeda from 4 Middle Eastern countries executed the most significant terrorist attack ever on American soil. They were organized into 4 teams, including pilots who had been trained here in the United States the year before. The other 3 members of the team apparently didn't know their mission until the last minute. All 4 planes were California-bound commercial airliners that took off from 3 different airports here in the eastern U.S. The first team boarded American Airlines Flight 11. They hijacked it and flew it into the North Tower of One World Trade Center. Less than an hour later, United Airlines Flight 175 flew into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. The third hijacked plane, American Airlines Flight 77, flew into the Pentagon. A 4th flight, United Airlines Flight 93, later believed aimed for Washington, D.C., was bravely taken over by passengers who forced it to crash in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. A total of 265 passengers, including the terrorists, were killed in the plane crashes. 2,606 people died in the collapse of the World Trade Center and the surrounding area, and 125 died at the Pentagon. That's a total of 2,996 deaths, including 344 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers. More than 6,000 were injured, and quite a few of those have since died from their 9/11 related injuries. Lest we forget, the Sevier County Public Library System History Center is honoring those casualties by offering recollections of where some of our people were when 9/11 happened, what they were doing, and what they recall.
Well, I was out of work. The company I worked for was a contract manufacturing company, and they just lost their contract. And so I was sitting in front of a computer trying to find a job. I'm an industrial engineer, and I had a television on in the back because I like to have noise going on all the time. And I heard something going on it was CNN at the time. And I looked over and I saw one of the twin towers with smoke coming out. And I said, oh my God. So I stopped and looked at the television. And the next thing I saw was an airplane flying into the second tower. I actually saw it hit. And the first thing that came to my mind is, oh my God, it's going to be a long time before I get a job. My wife's brother was in Moscow at the time, her older brother, and I sent him an email telling him that both towers had fallen. It was just a hollow feeling that our country was under attack. Now, at the time, we were in northern Mississippi, Olive Branch to be exact, which is a suburb of Memphis, and I heard that they were landing airplanes, all the airplanes.
I remember standing watching the television relatively early in the morning, 9-ish, 10-ish, something like that, with my father, who was a World War II survivor and a sailor during World War II in the Pacific. And my father was so distraught. He had our grandsons, and I remember him going, please, please, I don't want my grandsons to go through all this. So I had gotten him calmed down and what have you, and I was a realtor at that time and had a sales meeting that I needed to attend that was on the other side of the county from where our home was. And to drive to where the sales meeting was gonna be, I had to drive under the glide path of airplanes heading into the Memphis International Airport. And while it was not just FedEx, it was planes from everywhere. It was just a nonstop viewing. You couldn't avoid seeing these planes, just one right after the other being landed, because the government had issued a no-fly order and what have you.
And the Memphis airport is very busy. It's home of FedEx, and so just for the heck of it, we drove past her that afternoon, and I've never seen so many airplanes, different airlines lined up. Just the runways were packed, and obviously, and then that night we saw the national news, and that's about it.
I remember exactly where I was. I was working at PS50 in New York City. I was a bilingual teacher's assistant. And that morning we had a beautiful start. I remember we were finishing our morning routine when the principal walked into the building, into the classroom, and told us that we were entering a lockdown. The teacher and I looked at each other concerned. What's going on? The classroom until further notice. But outside the window, you can actually hear sirens and everybody hitting the streets. They were screaming, shouting. We just walked over to the window. You could see all the activity going on. But we were able to maintain the class under control. My biggest concern was outside the school building, because you can hear people banging on the doors. There was crying, there was screaming, and the reason behind that was parents were devastated. They were there to pick up their children, make sure everybody was safe. I didn't realize how bad the situation was until I made it home that evening. I think I sat in front of my TV set from maybe 6 p.m. until 3 in the morning, just reviewing how big the devastation was, how the city had just been destroyed. It was until that moment that I realized the way I view the world had changed forever.
This actually started on September the 9th. My wife and I were on a working vacation in Bar Harbor, Maine, and Sunday morning the 9th, I woke up and I knew something horrible was getting ready to happen, 4 o'clock. And I said, let's go home. Something's horrible getting ready to happen. So we packed up, we're out of the motel room by 4:30, traveling south. We called family, no one's sick, no emergencies. Called kin folks, no one's sick, no emergencies. And I couldn't figure out what in the world's going on. Something bad is getting ready to happen. So we got to Winchester, Virginia that night, Sunday night, and we stayed over in a restaurant there. And on the 9th, or the 11th, I'm sorry, on the 11th, we had just eaten breakfast at Cracker Barrel and got out. And my brother called me and said a plane hit the World Trade Center. He said, you've been there, haven't you? And I said, yeah, I was there a couple of years ago for a conference. And he said, well, it's down. And tried to get some news, couldn't get anything on radio. And all, once the semis left the interstate, troopers left, we didn't see a patrol car anywhere from Winchester, Virginia, all the way into exit 407 over here at Sevierville. And so we came on, and when I got home, the kids were there. My brother came, some family came, and we talked, figuring what to go, what to do. But while we were coming south, Fred Burry of Burry Funeral Home, he was deputy commander, Fred O'Burry Jr., he said, Bobo, put the pedal to the metal because we're going to New York tomorrow. He said, the presidents will activate our team this afternoon. And sure enough, he did. And that night, after we ate, we watched the news and ate and talked. And Fred said, get us a van. There'll be 6 of us from Tennessee going up tomorrow. And so I finally found a van at the airport, but I couldn't get in. So I called my friends at 911 in Knoxville and Holt Clark, and he arranged everything. He said, call this number when you get on en route, and they'll unlock the gate for you. So on the 12th, Fred took me to the airport at Knoxville, and we got a van and came back to Very Funeral Home in Knoxville and loaded up. By 6:30, 6 of us from Tennessee were in the van, and a team nurse from Georgia was in the van. It was actually 7. Excuse me. So we headed north with the directions. We'll call you later today and tell you where to go to. Come up 81 toward New York, and we'll tell you later. So about 1 o'clock, we got a call from National Center to go to Stewart Air Force Base. We went up 81 to 84 and found that Air Force Base, rolled up to the gate, and the MP was out there with the M16, and several was standing around there. We knew who it was and what I was doing. I showed him my federal badge and my retired badge from Knoxville Police Department. He said he's a retired officer too, so he let us in. And that was the first day. About 6 o'clock in the afternoon, on that side, and somebody else got in the car with me. I cannot imagine. I can't remember who it was. I cannot imagine some other team member, but it was. And the trooper said, tighten your seatbelts. And so we tightened the seatbelts, and here we went. Wide open, lights and siren going, and it was just white knuckle ride, and up on the sidewalk, around and through the grass. I mean, it is crazy. I finally told the trooper, I said, buddy, we don't have to get there that fast. He said, I got my orders to get you there as soon as possible. I said, all right. He said, buckle up. Be sure you buckle good. So here we went. And I didn't have a clue where we were going. We went up this exit ramp the wrong way, and I could see the debris and the smoke ahead. We went about 2 blocks, and he said, this is close. I'll get you, buddy. Good luck. And I got out and got my little backpack, and he said, walk toward the lights. And so here I am in the dark. Everything complete darkness there. And I started walking toward the rubble, the lights, and he said, you'll find a NYPD temporary morgue on the left up there. And he said, check in with them. So I had a little flashlight. I got to walking and went through 2 checkpoints, and they had shotguns and AR-15s guarding the place well. And I went in to found the temporary morgue, and I walked in. And of course, they was really standoffish. They knew who I was in uniform. Never seen that uniform before. And somebody finally asked me who it was, and I told them I was Officer BOHANNAN, retired, Knoxville Police Department, 26 years crime lab. And then he was okay. I mean, we're fellas, we're fellow officers. We know each other. And after a little while, he said, walk up the street about 3 blocks. He said, there's a Burger King right in the debris field. And go up the 2nd floor, and they got all kind of equipment. And so I walked up there. And when I got to where the towers had fell, I just stopped and looked. The odors, the sights, the sounds, unbelievable. I never found a word for that. So as I was standing there watching, they had this huge crane with a basket on it with a red dog, I think it was Labrador, slowly going over the rubble trying to find anybody that was alive. And I stood there for a while and watched them, and I looked, turned left, and I seen the Burger King, so I walked over and went up the steps. And the officer said, buddy, anything here, said, take it, it's paid for. And so I got a couple of things and some cold drink, and I just kind of stood against the wall and watched all these officers and firemen come up, and they were sitting to my left in a row of chairs. And I just stood there and wondered as they got up and moved chair to chair to chair, and then it dawned on me, that's the restroom. They're waiting to go to the restroom. And I had the same expression on them, just horror, covered in grime and dust and just unrecognizable almost. But they had come up there to get something to drink on the restroom. So I watched it for a little while, and I went back down and stood there in the rubble, and they had these huge cranes with a dipper and a thumb on it so they could slowly dip out pieces of the debris field. And I watched for a while. Big old lights illuminate everything, and then I seen 2 officers, one on each side of the dipper, watching for anything. And what they were watching for was pieces of clothing or human remains. And all at once somebody yelled, stop, stop, stop. So all at once the big crane, the engine, I guess went to idle. To me, it just went silent. And he motioned for somebody to come on up there, and 2 officers went up and they saluted something on the ground. I couldn't see what it was, but they got down, they motioned for somebody to bring a basket up, a human basket, and they brought the basket up and slowly got down on their hands and knees and lifted something and put it in this basket. It was part of the uniform. And I don't know if they knew who that was, but it didn't matter. They were first responders. and they died trying to save somebody else. So all at once, these huge lines formed, and they slowly placed the basket of human remains back down. And I didn't see it, but there's a gator backed up, four-wheel gator, and they put it on the back of that and called attention while they put a flag on it. They took it back to the temporary morgue, didn't even take it in. When they got back to the morgue, an ambulance was waiting there, and the recovery team had a form to fill out and started documenting everything that was done. The grid workers found it, who found it, and the team found it, and the time, date, and all that. And so they shut the door, and everybody stood back with their heart hit over their heart. And watched the fellow go away. And everybody's crying. It's very emotional. But I was there at ground zero for 10 days. I got really bad sick and had to come home. And Fred Burry wanted to come home because we had to bring the van back to the airport. We picked a date and time, and Fred said we're going to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I don't have the exact date. But I drove, and he navigated, and we got lost one time. But I was there for 10 days at ground zero.
On the morning of September 11th, I was at my husband's business, and I was working for him, but also taking care of my 1-year-old son, Noah. Our older children were at school, and my husband had the radio on, and he heard what had happened with the first plane when it flew into the building. So he was like, oh, you need to turn on the news. We need to see what's going on. So we turned on CNN, and they were all talking about the first plane hitting, and we thought it was a terrible accident at that point. And then when we saw the second one fly into the building, and then it was getting a little bit scary, but by the time the third one flew into the Pentagon, it was really scary. To the point of, I didn't know, whether we were under attack, like everywhere, could something be happening, or do we need to pick up our kids from school? It was a pretty scary time. A week out from that, my husband and I had to go to Washington, D.C. on business, and while we were there, it was still a no-fly zone around the Capitol area, and it was very eerily silent because plane activity is very much in that area, but there was nothing. It was just quiet.
On 9/11 in the morning, I was at home. I was coming into the office at the Mountain Press. I was a staff writer at the time, and I did not turn on my TV or listen to the radio on the way to work. So I came into work a little later that day. I got to work at like 11, unaware of anything. So I walked into the newsroom. I wasn't in the habit of watching the news or listening to the news in the morning at that time because I was involved in the news all day. So I walked in the newsroom happy-go-lucky and walked into my desk, and people said, hey, have you watched the news today? And I said, no, I haven't seen anything. And so they directed me to the TV. And so it was after the fact when I first found out. It was around 11 o'clock. And so I had to get caught up kind of quick. My wife's family lives in New York City, so we were concerned for them. They're in Queens, not Manhattan, so we weren't that concerned. We knew they weren't going to be in the city that morning. But I was concerned for family that I had up there. But we got in touch with them pretty quickly and found out that they were all okay. So that was good. It was just shocking, you know. I don't remember exactly my feelings, but I know that it was just, I guess shocking is the right word, because it was something we weren't expecting to happen, you know, here in America, and it was happening. And we were used to hearing these kind of stories from, you know, the Middle East and other places, but to have one at that time here was just a little bit caught me off guard, I guess.
I was in high school classroom in West Tennessee doing sort of classes with economics and child development, and we didn't know much about it in the beginning when it first happened. About my second or third class period, students started coming in talking about it, and they had questions, wanted to know what was going on, had their own opinions about what they thought was happening. Then at lunchtime, the director of the technology center told us that it had been a terrorist attack. So we spent the rest of the afternoon, or I did, with students, just answering their questions and talking to them and telling them, you know, kind of trying to help them sort it out. We didn't have a lot of answers, but we wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to talk about it. I think probably one of the striking moments for me was with my children. My son was about 11 or 12, and when they were talking about the number of people that had died in the 9/11 attacks, he looked at me and he said, "That's not the right number, Mommy, because there were pregnant mamas in those buildings." So it was kind of an eye-opening experience to have a child say there were a lot more people than they're accounting for at this point. So anyway, it was an amazing, difficult time for young people, and I was glad to be in a classroom trying to help them sort it all out.
I was in Ohio, Jefferson, Ohio to be exact. Just came home from work. On that day, the news was on. My mother, my brother, and I were watching it. I came home just when the second plane was going to hit the tower. Actually, it was a very quiet room. Nobody said anything. We were kind of very, very astonished, overwhelmed, didn't know what to say at that point.
On 9/11, I was the police chief in the city of Sevierville, and I was at City Hall in the conference room getting ready for a staff meeting. And I was sitting there watching the television and preparing my notes for the upcoming meeting, and saw on the TV where they came across the news that something had crashed into the World Trade Center, and that kind of alerted everyone and got everyone's attention. And when I saw that, I went out and brought some other folks in who were getting ready for the meeting as well, and we sat there and watched the events, saw the second plane hit, and again continued to watch the events for the rest of the day. We tried to have a meeting, and one of the things that I remember talking about was the fact that I told Jim DeAnda was sitting there with us in the group, and I said, the world that we knew has just changed and will forever be changed. We will never see the latitude that we've had to travel and do things like we have in the past.